Today I'm going to talk on the clinical presentation and management of hepatitis B and C. These are very common topics. It is very prevalent in our population, and it is very important to know what is hepatitis and how does it manifest and how does it cause injury. So if you can see this figure, this is a healthy liver and this is a fibrotic liver. The liver, due to any disease, inflammation, any insulting factor, it changes and becomes fibrosed. And when it becomes fibrosis is basically the scarring. If you observe that when we have any cut on a surface or any trauma, so there is a natural tendency of the body to get healed, and after healing there is a scar formation and it leads to the fibrosis. Similarly, if there is any injury or insult to the liver, it causes the inflammation and then causes the scarring or the fibrosis. So the continuous inflammation of the liver caused by hepatitis can lead to fibrosis, formation of scar, or and when the fibrosis occurs, the liver fails to function normally. So as you know that liver is the one of the essential organs of the body, and there is only a single liver in the body. There is no compensation. If the liver fails to work, the patient will be unable to survive. Okay, so after the stage of fibrosis, there is a stage of cirrhosis. In cirrhosis, the scar tissue replaces the normal healthy tissue, blocking the flow of the blood through the liver and preventing it from working as it should be. As I have mentioned, in the cirrhotic liver, the size of the liver gets shrunken due to the fibrosis, and the liver totally fails to work. And another complication is the liver cancer because of this fibrosis and inflammation. So some auto process starts and it leads to the formation of the cancer. Oncogenic process starts. So why it is an important to know, because hepatitis B and C ultimately, if not treated, can cause these liver damage like fibrosis, cirrhosis, and liver cancer. So now, okay, there are some similarities between the two viruses, hepatitis B and C, and some differences. The similarities, like they have almost the same mode of transmission. Um, um, they have similar, more or less similar clinical presentation, but once it becomes liver gets fibrosed, they both can cause the similar complications of cirrhosis, cancer, and other complications. But there are a lot of differences as well, like in the structure, in the pathogenesis, in the treatment obviously, and mm, in the prevention. So I will um, explain both the viruses separately. First we will discuss hepatitis B and then we will discuss hepatitis C. So hepatitis B is an infectious disease caused by hepatitis B virus. It is a major public health problem, as I've already mentioned, can cause hepatitis, cirrhosis, and its hepatocellular carcinoma. The overall in the world, around 350 millions are infected. That is 0.3%, out of which majority are Asians. Remember, so this is a very common pathogen in the as compared to the Western world, and it is human carcinogen, means cancer causing up to 80% of the liver cancers. Coming to the structure of the hepatitis B, I am not going into the much into the detail, but you can just remember it is a DNA virus, while hepatitis C is an RNA virus. DNA is a deoxyribonucleic acid, RNA is a ribonucleic acid. So it is a DNA virus. It has a circular structure. So there are a number of core proteins. These are important, but not for third years, but when you do the fellowships and when you do more studies in the GI. So these are the proteins which are present, and these are helpful in the diagnosis and the treatment. So on the surface is the HB surface protein. This is commonly called HBsAg, and this is the protein which is usually done in the laboratory to diagnose the hepatitis C. Then another is the HBE protein, that is envelope protein. Then HBC is the core means inside, core protein. Then this is the DNA virus, partially double stranded DNA virus, and this is the enzyme for this HBV DNA polymerase. So basically okay
मैडम
students
आपकी आवाज थोड़ी
there
स्लो
were
है थोड़ी।
acha okay students there was some problem with the internet, so there was some disruption. Now coming back to the lecture, I will go a bit fast because of the shortage of time. So the transmission of hepatitis B is due to these of the following routes, like percutaneous routes, due to the exposure of infectious blood or body fluids. It is 100 times more infectious than HIV, remember, so it is more dangerous than an HIV to get infected. Then perinatal, from the mother to the child. So a mother who is positive for surface antigen has 20% risk of passing the infection to the offspring. So whenever a pregnant woman is positive, so we have to treat that mother during pregnancy to prevent this perinatal transmission. And the risk is as high as 90% if this is all she is also positive for E antigen, that is the envelope antigen. Then sexual transmission from the husband to wife or wife to husband, then from the breastfeeding, but it does not appear to contribute. So the mother can easily breastfeed the baby without very much risk to the child. Other modes of transmission in children: vertically at birth, through the iatrogenic, through during the procedures like folk remedies, exposure to body fluids in adults, sexual exposure, percutaneous and mucosal exposures. This is called the horizontal transmission, and from mother to the child, it is called vertical transmission. So direct exposure from blood transfusions or organ transplants, and person to person exposure can occur after close interpersonal contact, such as after okay, these are the concentrations of hepatitis B in various body fluids. You can see that it is very much high in the blood, in the serum, and in the wounds. If the wound is open, so whenever we have a patient with hepatitis B, we ask the patient, so do not expose your wound or the body fluids to any other person. If you have a cut and you do the cooking, cut over your finger, and if you do the cooking and your fluid, it gets transmitted to the via the food to the other, so they can cause infection. Then moderate in the semen, vaginal fluid, and saliva, and low in the urine, feces, sweat, tears, and the breast milk. So mothers can easily breastfeed their child. So these are the risk group of patients who can acquire the hepatitis B. Children of immigrants from areas where there is high prevalence of hepatitis B, like in Asian countries, IV drug abusers, infants born to infected mothers, history of sexually transmitted diseases, sexual contacts, household contacts. It does not transmit through normal touching, kissing, or through the sharing of the utensils, but if you share the like if the person has some open wound and the other person is exposed to that, then they can get the infection. Then healthcare and public safety workers and hemodialysis patients. So now again coming to the hepatitis B, as we have already discussed, it causes hepatocellular inflammation, necrosis. It can cause either acute or chronic infection. Acute infection means whenever as soon as the virus enters the body, it causes the immediate inflammation or infection. And if it is less than 6 months duration, it is called acute. And if it is persistent for more than 6 months, and then it causes the symptoms, it can cause a chronic infection those, so they can cause the asymptomatic or symptomatic progressive disease. Asymptomatic means the patient is having the virus in the body, but patient does not know about it, patient does not have the symptoms until the liver gets very much damaged, fibrosed, and ultimately the complication started. And when the workup is done, they are diagnosed to be suffering from hepatitis. So this asymptomatic is also very dangerous. Chronic hepatitis B, it is defined as the persistence of surface antigen for more than 6 months in the body. Okay. Now the epidemiology and the burden, we have already discussed. 2 billion people have past or present infection, and 240 million are the carriers. Carriers are those patients they have the antigen in their body, means virus in their body, but they are asymptomatic. Their virus load and level of the virus is very low. They are basically silent and they are not causing inflammation at the time, but they can reactivate at any time in the future. So hepatitis B, acute and chronic. And in acute, the fatality is very low, that is over 0.5 to 1%. Most of the acute hepatitis B recover, while chronic hepatitis B accounts for 45% of cases of HCC, and 30% undergo last stage of the liver cirrhosis. Now coming to the clinical presentation, so we have acute symptomatic that begins 2 to 3 months after the exposure and lasts for 2 to 4 months. As I've said, acute is basically defined as persistent for less than 6 months. Symptoms of acute hepatitis B, these are the non-specific symptoms. A person can get these symptoms with any of the viruses. We cannot differentiate on the basis of symptoms that the patient is having hepatitis B or any other liver disease. Fatigue, loss of appetite, nausea, arthralgias, vomiting, abdominal pain, low grade fever, jaundice, dark urine, light stools. So these are the very common features to all of the hepatitis. So acute B becomes chronic in more than 90%. So if a person is infected in a very young age, infants infected from their mothers, so 90% of the chances are that they becomes chronic in 25. But if the children is develops a hepatitis B, then there is chances of 25 to 50% that they will develop chronic hepatitis. But if the adults develop hepatitis B, so there is less than 5% chances of getting chronic. Means if the as the age increases, so there are less chances of hepatitis to become chronic. So those patients who are immunocompromised, like dialysis patients or cancer patients, tuberculosis patients, patients with HIV or dialysis, they have a higher chances of getting chronic infection. And 0.5% who acquire disease early in life resolve spontaneously, means the body develops mechanism, has immunity, and without treatment only 0.5% of the patients resolve the hepatitis itself. And of those who develop chronic B as a children, so 25% will die when till the time they becomes adults. So majority of them have become fibrosed and cirrhotic, and 25% out of them will die from consequences of hepatitis B. So acute illness, we have already discussed. Incubation period 30 days to 180 days, and infection can be mild, may not be clinically apparent. Symptoms include, we have already discussed all these. Then they have these phases, no need to remember, but remember, first is the replication phase. Patients are asymptomatic, only the blood tests are positive. In the second phase, the symptoms appear, all of the non-specific symptoms. In the third phase is the ecteric, means that patient develop jaundice, means initially the non-specific symptoms and later the patients develop jaundice. And the fourth phase, jaundice resolve and the liver enzymes becomes normal. So what are the complications? These are the complications of acute hepatitis. So acute can become fulminant. Fulminant is the total liver failure, means massive hepatic necrosis, and without liver transplantation the patients usually die with the fulminant. There is a very a less rate of survival. So with the signs and symptoms of encephalopathy. Encephalopathy is basically the coma or the neurological symptoms that occur due to the liver pathology. So this the onset of encephalopathy within the 8 weeks of the onset. So immediately when the patient gets acute hepatitis, there is a rapid development of liver necrosis, and the patient develops encephalopathy within 8 weeks, and liver gets small. And PT is the prothrombin time. It indicates that the liver synthetic function, because liver synthesize the clotting factors, so liver synthetic function is also disturbed, so PT is prolonged in these patients, and these leads to the bleeding tendencies anywhere from the body. Now coming to the chronic hepatitis B, what are its clinical features? Progression to chronicity is as high as 95 in neonates, as I have discussed already, and compared to only 1 to 5%, means if the neonate or the infant acquire hepatitis acutely, then there are 95% that it becomes chronic, while if the adults acquire infection, there is 1 to 5% chances that from acute it develops chronic. Again, the clinical symptoms are non-specific like anorexia, weight loss, fatigue. So when the patients come to us in the gastro GI clinics, liver clinics with all these non-specific symptoms, like they do not feel well, they have body aches, bony aches, and they have decreased appetite, some have weight loss. So does not necessarily these patients have jaundice in their eyes. Usually there is no jaundice in chronic hepatitis. So then whenever patient come with these symptoms, we go for the testing of hepatitis. So physical findings may include the hepatomegaly, and most cases are among the adults. Okay, and most cases mostly the acute phase is the asymptomatic. When the patient becomes symptomatic, already the patient has chronic hepatitis, means the virus was present in the body more than 6 months back, and now the patient becomes symptomatic. There are some extra there are some extra hepatic manifestation, means these hepatic viruses predominantly cause the liver infection, but they can cause infection at other parts of the body like arthralgias, arthritis, purpuras, vasculitic disorders like polyarthritis nodulosa, glomerulonephritis, pleural effusion, pericardial effusion. So if a patients are coming with these extra hepatic diagnosis, and we are suspecting hepatitis, so we have to diagnose hepatitis as well. Now coming to the markers of infection, after I have discussed the uh, structure, epidemiology, then clinical presentation, acute versus chronic. Now let's discuss the how do we diagnose the infection, and in the end I will discuss the treatment. So markers of infection are virus antigens and antibodies. So antigens are these are the proteins present over the surface of the virus which we detect in the blood, and antibodies, these are the reaction, immunological reaction, and the antibodies are developed in a body as a reaction. So we also diagnose these. So these are the serological markers, and then virological markers, that is means the presence of hepatitis B virus itself, DNA virus itself. We detect this virus and the genotype. What is the type? So there are four types: hepatitis A, B, C, and D. So sorry, in hepatitis B, we have six genotypes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So these are the genotypes, so we have to detect this. Then biochemical is the biochemistry, how much liver function test is deranged. Others like prothrombin time, albumin, platelet count as well. Then histological is on the liver biopsy, detecting the level of inflammation and the fibrosis. This can be done through the liver biopsy. Through the fibroscan is a specific non-invasive radiological diagnosis which detect the level of fibrosis, and the non-invasive markers can also detect the level of fibrosis. Now, coming to the virological markers is the hepatitis HBV DNA virus, which we detect both the quality and quantity. And based on the quantity, we decide the treatment. As we have discussed, that there is a carrier stage in which the viral load is very much low in the body. So these patients are labeled as carrier states, HBV carriers. Then HBV genotypes, as we have discussed, there are 9 genotypes A through I, though first 6 are common. From A to C are common, while the rest are very rare. Okay. And antiviral therapy is equally effective. So usually in clinical practice, we do not go for the genotypes because these are only experimental in the labs. But clinically, we do not diagnose the genotypes. We just diagnose the virus and then treat it. And hepatitis B vaccine is protective against all the genotypes. Okay. Now, the liver functions and histological markers, as we have discussed, ALT is the alanine transaminase. This is liver specific marker, and this is very important in monitoring the treatment, when to treat the patient, and how to monitor the patient. Initially, it is raised. If it is raised 2 times the normal level, then we treat the patient, and after the treatment, it should normalize. So, in chronic hepatitis B, ALT can be periodically or consistently increases. Other markers I have already discussed: serum albumin, prothrombin time, and bilirubin. Then histological markers also we have discussed. Non-invasive tests can be like APRI score and fibro test. From the other non-invasive test, we can diagnose the fibrosis. Now, these are the few phases of the body. For third years, you do not need to learn all these. You can only just have the idea of the phases, because when a virus enters in the body, it does not necessarily means that we have to treat the patient. We have to first decide the patient, what is the phase of the patient, and accordingly we have to manage. Like there is an immune tolerant phase in which HBe antigen is positive and treatment is not indicated, but monitoring is required because the virus is present in the body, but currently there is minimal damage to the virus, minimal histological disease, so treatment is not necessary. Second is the immune active phase, hepatitis E antigen positive, then in this the treatment is indicated. Then third is the inactive chronic inactive stage. This is called inactive carrier state. Again, in this treatment is not indicated. Then immune escape phase, this is chronic hepatitis phase, and in this treatment is indicated. So for third years, you can just remember the names of the phases, and whether treatment is indicated or not. You do not need to remember about the levels and very much details about this. But it is important to say that whenever a patient is hepatitis B positive, it is best to refer the patient to the trained and certified gastroenterologist rather than a clinical GP or local GP, because local GP does not have very much information about all this. So they treat all these phases equally, so which is not necessary, and they will in fact deteriorate the disease. Okay. So fifth one is the acute on chronic hepatitis. For example, if the patient is already hepatitis chronic, but some insult occurs or there is some reactivation of the virus within the body, and then the patient becomes acute on chronic, develops acute on chronic hepatitis. So in short, if you can see this slide, acute hepatitis, 90% of the children develop chronic, less than 5% of the children develop chronic hepatitis, out of which 15 to 40 develop liver cancer. Chronic hepatitis can lead to liver cirrhosis, can lead to liver failure. If there is liver failure, if there is liver cancer, either the patient needs liver transplantation, because without liver transplantation there is no survival. And remember, at these stages like liver failure, cirrhosis and cancer, you cannot reverse the pathology. Means if you treat the patient with antiviral, with the hepatitis B and C drugs, but they will not reverse this fibrosis, so ultimately the patient require liver transplantation. And if it is not available, as in Pakistan it is not readily available, and it is very very much expensive, costly. There are complications of the surgery, complications of the post-operative complications. So without liver transplantation, patient will ultimately death will ultimately occurs. So now the diagnostic criteria: hepatitis B positive for more than 6 months, we label as chronic hepatitis B. Persistent or intermittent elevation of ALT, means if the ALT normal range is 30, then there should be 60 in the blood for the treatment. Then elevated HBV DNA levels. So we do the quantification of the DNA in the blood. Then liver biopsy, this is optional. Sometimes we do, sometimes we do not. Now coming to the management of hepatitis B. So why do we need to manage? First, discuss the goals and the evaluation: history and physical examination, family history, test to assess the liver disease, test for HBV replication. These we have already discussed, so I'm going very rapidly. Test to rule out other co-infections. Co-infections are very important because they add the risk of liver injury. For example, if the patient is hepatitis B, along with this he is also hepatitis C positive or D positive or HIV, so they have double the risk of liver damage and fibrosis. Test to screen for hepatocellular carcinoma, whether if the liver is fibrosis, we have to test that is he having carcinoma or not. Then consider liver biopsy to grade and stage the liver disease. Now what are the goals? Why do we need to treat the hepatitis? Suppress the HPV replication, because if we suppress the replication, definitely the liver fibrosis, decrease hepatic inflammation and fibrosis, and ultimately we prevent the progression to cirrhosis, liver failure and HCC. Remember, if the patient is already become cirrhotic and liver failure has already started, so at this stage if we treat the patient, it will not reverse. So it is very important to treat these hepatitis at the early stage. Now the treatment recommendations, again, for third years you do not need to remember all these treatment criteria. I will skip this. I will just go into the treatment options. So currently treatment options are 7 antiviral drugs, out of which the others are oral. One is only injectable, that is peg interferon, and all the other oral: lamivudine, edifovir, anticovid, telbividine, tenofovir and emtricitabine are approved. In Pakistan, most commonly, or in not only in Pakistan but internationally, currently we are using this drug tenofovir to treat the hepatitis. Interferon, this is injectable drug. It has a lot of side effects. Initially we used to treat the patients with this, but um, now we are not treating with this drug interferon, and these are the oral drugs I have already discussed. So mode of action is these are: it enhances phagocytic activity, it inhibits viral replication and increases the cytotoxicity, while for oral drugs it acts by inhibition of DNA polymerase enzyme. This enzyme is involved in replication, so we are basically decreasing the viral replication, and in this we are basically immunomodulating the defense mechanism of the body, not directly affecting the virus. Okay, so management of what is management of acute hepatitis. As we have already discussed, recovery in 99% antiviral therapy is usually not required. Okay, so but if it is persist for more than 6 months, it becomes chronic, then we treat the patient. And in rare cases of severe acute hepatitis B, which is going into the fulminant liver failure, we can treat again with these drugs, entecavir or tenofovir. Okay, so how do we monitor the response to the treatment? Again, these were the this slide I showed initially: virological, histological, biochemical, serological. So we need to see the improvement in all these things, like decrease in the HBV DNA levels, histology, improvement in the histology, ALT becomes normal, and the HBs antigen, initially it was positive, it should becomes negative. E antigen, initially it was positive, should becomes negative. It is called the seroconversion. Now, because of the lack of time, I'm skipping these, but we have specific populations in which we have to treat with the specific, because in HBV 20% of the chances of HDV as well. So if HDV is present, so only treatment option is interferon. Oral antiviral drugs are not effective in HDV. In HBV and HCV, interferon again, because interferon is effective against both these, HBV and HCV. Then HBV and tuberculosis, because tuberculosis, anti-tuberculosis drugs causes the liver injury, drug induced liver injury. So already if the liver is damaged with hepatitis B, then there is a more chances of hepatotoxicity. So you have to be cautious in treating both the diseases simultaneously. And again, the extrahepatic manifestations, as I have discussed, again peg interferon is used. Acute hepatitis B, I have already covered. In pregnant women, I have already covered that you have to treat the patient with tenofovir, because if not, pregnant women are not treated, there is very much high chances of the infant to develop the hepatitis B. Then dialysis and renal transplant patients, these are immunocompromised patients. Again, they have a very high chances of getting the infections, so they also needs treatment. Liver transplantation we have already discussed. Now coming to the vaccines, this is a preventive approach. Okay, this is one difference between the hepatitis B and C. In hepatitis B, the vaccine is available. In hepatitis C, preventive vaccine is not available. So we have to give the in the 3 doses at 0, 1, and 6 months, and the titer. How do we know that we have developed effective protection? If the titer is more than 10 ml, then we can say that the patient has developed the protection. So indications for vaccine are all the infants, children, adolescents, vaccination of adults, which kind of adults, occupational exposure, sexual and household contacts, IV drug abusers in high prevalent areas. Again, the same slide. HPV vaccine 20 microgram, 1 and 3 and 6 months interval, and it is 94% it has response. There is another prevention which is called HBIG. HBIG is hepatitis B immunoglobulin, and it is passive immunization. Passive immunization means if the patient has any exposure, like for example needle stick injury. For example, if the patient is hepatitis B positive and a nurse is drawing the blood and there is accidental break of that nurse with the needle stick, so we can immediately give that HBIG, hepatitis B immunoglobulin, so as to prevent the infection of that person. So this was the dose 0.06 ml per kg. Conclusion: chronic hepatitis B is a global health problem. It has wide range like subclinical chronic hepatitis, cirrhosis, decompensation, carcinomas. First line treatments are pegylated interferons, then entecavir and tenofovir. Okay. Now, quickly, I am going through the hepatitis C virus. Some things you will find the similar and some features you will find the different. It is non-A non-B virus. It is obvious the structure. In B it was circular. In hepatitis C it is a linear structure. You do not need to remember these, but these are the core and these are the envelope proteins, NS proteins, and these proteins are the markers of the treatment where the antiviral treatment acts. So genotypes, there are 11 genotypes, and out of those genotypes there are 90 subtypes. Like if genotype 1, there are subtypes A, B, C, and etc. So no, for third years, no, do not need to remember the genotypes. But for Pakistan we have the genotype 3. Like India, genotype 3 is common, so in Pakistan 3 then 1 is common. Now, coming to the mode of transmission, injection drug abusers, just like similar to hepatitis B, 60% in 10% causes unknown, in 5% is a healthcare, hemodialysis, perinatal, blood transfusion, in 10% sexual, in 15%. In hepatitis B, if you compare, there's more sexual transmission as compared to hepatitis C. Transmission again, bloodborne, high risk transfusion, IV drug abusers, low risk is hemodialysis, occupational needle stick, and body piercing tattoos. These are very common methods. Um, and the patients are unaware that they are being getting infected with hepatitis from these sources. From pregnant to child, non-sexual household is rare, as I've already discussed. From the utensils, from the kissing, or from the touching hands, it is not transmitted. But with the sharing of personal items like razors and toothbrushes, they can cause transmission. Now, coming to the pathogenesis, there is direct cell injury due to the viral application, and there is immune mediated. Direct is direct damage to the cell with the virus, and with the immune system of the body gets activated and they cause a cell injury. So coming to the natural history, just like the hepatitis B, 30 years are needed from this to this stage. So if the patient is developing acute infection at a young age, when it becomes adult, it might have developed these complications. Normal liver, acute infection, chronic infection in 80%. Remember, in hepatitis B, chronic infection was in less than 5% in adults. However, in children it was more than 90, but in adults it was less than 5. However, in hepatitis C it is around 80. Means majority of the patients who develop acute are going to develop the chronic hepatitis. Then it develops cirrhosis in 20%, and out of which there's a risk of carcinoma cancer in 1 to 4%. So this is a natural history. Then hepatocellular carcinoma I have already discussed. Then now how to diagnose this hepatitis C. Antibody test, this is called anti-HCV. It initially should be positive, then viral load, HCV RNA again, it is qualitative as well as it is quantitative. So it should be positive, and ALT levels, liver enzymes, it can be normal, it can fluctuate, it can becomes high. So indications of screening. So whom should we test for hepatitis C? Persons who have IV drug abusers, persons with conditions of high prevalence like with HIV. Every HIV patient should be tested for hepatitis C. With hemophilia, who are receiving the blood products, who have been on dialysis, with unexplained LFTs. Whenever a person comes to gastroenterology clinic with the abnormal LFTs, we have to get tested for both hepatitis B and C. Then immigrants from the countries with higher prevalence. Children born to HCV infected mothers, remember early the antibodies transmit from the mother to the child, but these antibodies usually disappear. So if we want to check the status of the children, we should check it at 18 months. Healthcare, emergency medical and public safety workers after needle stick injury or mucosal exposure. For example, if I'm as a gastroenterologist, I'm doing the uh, endoscopy of a patient with hepatitis C. The patient is bleeding from the mouth, and accidentally that blood, I come in contact with that blood, like it spill over my face, my mouth or eyes accidentally. So, and I'm very much worried, so I should check for the hepatitis C. Then sexual partners of HCV infected persons. Prevention, as I have already mentioned, that no vaccine is yet available despite a lot of research and a lot of work has been done, but so far no vaccine has developed. Risk factors modification, we can modify the risk factors like IV drug abusers, we can reduce this population. Sexual contacts, person can use barrier contraception if he or she is C positive. Then avoid blood exposure, like the use of proper use of gloves, mask, face masks, and gowns, and the proper shields. Avoid body piercing, sharing razors, or receiving a tattoo. These are all the preventive measures which one can take, but there is no vaccine. HAV and B have vaccines. Now, the goals of therapy, as we have already discussed, just like hepatitis B, eradicate HCV in acute. When in hepatitis B, we do not need to treat acute because majority will recover, but every hepatitis C, if, even if in acute phase, should be treated because 80% of chances of getting chronic HCV. Decrease HCV associated morbidity and mortality. Attained SVR. What is SVR? SVR is sustained virological response. That is, if we treat the patient, we stop the treatment. Then after 6 months, we again treat the patient. We again check the patient that whether they have virus in their body or not. So if there is undetectable RNA virus 24 weeks after the therapy completion, we label that sustained response, means there is no reactivation of the virus. Normalize biochemical markers, improve clinical symptoms, prevent progression to cirrhosis, prevent development of end stage liver disease, and prevent development of chronic HCV infection. Now, what are the indications of antiviral therapy? Unlike hepatitis C, it does not have 5 stages as we have discussed, like immune and tolerant and chronic and all these. Patient with chronic SC who have HCV RNA in the serum, whether or not aminotransferase are increased, and chronic hepatitis B with fibrosis are candidates. So if we compare with hepatitis B, in hepatitis B, the ALT level should be 2 times normal. Then we have to treat. But in hepatitis C, if the HCV RNA is positive in the blood, whatever the level is, and if aminotransferase are not increased, means they can be normal, even then we have to treat the patient. Patients who have relapsed after or failed to respond to a interferon, because previously we had only interferon therapy like 10 or 15 years back, but and many patients do not respond to that. So in the previous patients who have failed with these treatments, they can now be treated with the oral therapy. Then compensated liver disease patients should also be treated. Acute HCV infection, recovery is rare, progression is common, so we have to treat the patient with this. Clinical presentation, as I have already discussed, can be asymptomatic. Again, the non-specific symptoms like fatigue, weakness, anorexia, jaundice, as I have discussed um, in the hepatitis B. Then rapid progression to fulminant liver disease. Chronic, again, after more than 6 months, again, they have the similar non-specific symptoms like anorexia, pain, fever, jaundice, malaise, etc. So, treatment of chronic SCV, difficult population. Some population are easy to treat, population are difficult to treat, like advanced disease, recurrence after liver transplant, patients, young patients, co-infections, kidney diseases, and non-responders. These are difficult populations to treat. Okay. Excuse me. Spontaneous resolution, unlike hepatitis B, very less chances of spontaneous resolution. So now coming to the treatment of all the genotypes is similar. So initially, previously we used to do the genotypes of the hepatitis C, but now since the development of advanced treatment, oral drugs are very much effective against all the genotypes. So now genotype is not necessary in treating the patient. So these are the oral drugs which are approved for the treatment of hepatitis B, out of which you have to remember sofosbuvir and ledipasvir, sofosbuvir, velpatasvir. These are the commonly used drugs which are commonly available in Pakistan for treating these drugs. Sofosbuvir, velpatasvir, and ledipasvir and declatasvir. These are the drugs. Other drugs, there's a very long list of drugs, oral drugs, which are available for treatment. So the key points are if the patient is exposed to interferon. Mm, okay, for third years, you do not need to remember these dosings and all the things. For third years, you just need to remember that these are the oral drugs. These are called DAAs, directly acting antiviral drugs. You can remember the name of the 2 or 3 drugs which I have already mentioned, like velpatasvir, mm, declatasvir, sofosbuvir, ledipasvir. These are the drugs which are commonly used. Okay, so if the patient is decompensated, for example, if the patient has already developed decompensation, you can add ribavirin. It is a again very effective drug against hepatitis C. So remember this point: if the patient has decompensated cirrhosis, add ribavirin to 2 DAAs. Add ribavirin. If you cannot add ribavirin because of the low hemoglobin, because ribavirin causes hemolytic anemia, they drop the hemoglobin level, then we can increase the duration to 24 weeks, increase the treatment duration. Now coming to the specific population, HIV and HCV infection. So there are a lot of drugs which are basically effective against both these. So we can give these drugs to the patients. Then liver transplantation, again we have, as I have already discussed, so liver when the patient develops liver fibrosis and stage liver disease, liver transplantation is the only hope for these patients. So how do we monitor the treatment? So we have discussed that we do the HCV genotype. We do not these days it is not necessary to do the genotype and subtype. We can only do the quantitative viral load and CBC-INR, liver function test, and the creatinine, the renal function test, because these drugs can cause renal failure and sometimes they are contraindicated in the renal patients. So you have, before starting the treatment, go for these tests and monitor these tests. Do the viral load after 4 weeks of therapy, when the treatment is completed, at the end of treatment, and 24 weeks after the treatment. Okay, monitoring the treatment we have already discussed. So for third year, no need to remember. Just remember you can do this repeat viral load after 4 weeks of therapy, 12 weeks after the therapy is completed, at the end of treatment, and 24 weeks after the treatment. For pregnant patients on ribavirin, so in pregnancy ribavirin is contraindicated. So in pregnancy it's better to complete the duration of the pregnancy and the breastfeeding and later on start the treatment. So do not women of children bearing age should have pregnancy test before initiation of therapy, and contraception and pregnancy should be assessed during after the completion of the treatment. Okay, so this is all for my lecture. And if you have any questions, you can ask me. You
मैडम
can.
आपको चैटिंग पे क्वेश्चन होंगे?
जी. So anyone has a question, please write down, then I will answer you. So far I have not get any questions? Hello? Any questions? Anyone? कोई क्वेश्चन नहीं आ रहा भाई.
ठीक है मैडम, ओके, अल्लाह हाफिज.
Okay, thank you.